morning, class. Hopefully you're excited to learn about tension member limit states! Exclamation point. All right, class, so today we're going to talk about the first two limit states of tension members, and that's going to be yielding and fracture. All right, what is the difference between yielding and fracture? Well, they happen at two distinct spots in the tension member. So we're going to take yielding as occurring in the main portion of the member. So we're going to say that yielding limit state is for excessive deformations in the gross cross-section, okay? So we call this the gross cross-section, or AG. Now, fracture occurs at our connections, right? In fracture, we have total member separation. So what would happen is we get some sort of split in the member right through the bolt holes because that has the lowest area, and we say that that is through the net section, and in steel design we call this the effective area. Before we talk about the calculations for these limit states, I have a great demonstration for you in which we're going to really be able to observe the behaviors of both yielding and fracture. All right, so for the demonstration, oh, did I forget to bring it with me? Well, maybe we can use something around here. I think I found some trash. Lovely trash bag. Oh, and it's a perfect tension member. Look at that. All right, now I need somebody who's willing to come up here and touch this trash with me.
Me.
All right, for this demonstration, I need you to grab the tension member just ahead of the bolt holes. And then we're going to apply a tension force on the member. As we pull this tension member, we can see that it starts to stretch, right? And it keeps stretching as we keep extending and pulling harder. Pulling harder. Come on, pulling harder. There we go. And you can see, this is what we call yielding. This is yielding, and we see that it happens across the distance of the member. This is a limit state, a failure limit state, because now the member is permanently deformed. It's super stretched. This is not a usable member in our structure, so this is one of our limit states. We don't want this to happen. All right, so we saw with yielding that it was a problem that happened in the gross cross-section. How do we calculate the gross cross-sectional area? Well, basically, it's the cross-sectional area through this spot right here in our member. So if we look at it transverse, that would look something like this for a rectangular member. And this shaded area here becomes our gross cross-sectional area, which is whatever the width of the member is times the thickness. So we would say our gross cross-sectional area is just the width times the thickness of the member at this location. So to put this in terms of a force that we can do for yielding, we say for our yielding limit state, we always start with our general design equation that P sub u is going to have to be less than phi Pn. Our phi is going to be phi for tension member limit states, so phi sub t. And then we need to come up with a way of calculating this. So we're going to say that our force has to be less than phi, our reduction factor, times, now how do we get a force from an area? Well, we multiply it by the stress. So we need to take into account the stress times the gross cross-sectional area. Now for yielding, what stress do you think we're going to use? Exactly, the yield stress. So we just substitute in here Fy for the yield stress, and now we have our yielding limit state for tension. And we'll note for yielding, phi is equal to 0.90. All right, the next limit state is fracture. This is going to consider what happens at the bolt holes. So when Maria grabs the bolt holes and pulls on it, what do we think is going to happen? Right. We have total member separation right there at the connection. So that is why in fracture we need to take into account the effective area at the connection when we do our calculations for this limit state. Now for the fracture limit state, we saw that that had to do with what happens at the connection, and we just saw that failure happen. So when we come up with our limit state for fracture, we're going to follow the same basic formula. P sub u has to be less than phi Pn. And we would say that the available strength from the member in fracture is equal to the stress times the area. But now what area do we use and what stress do we use? Well, what is the most stress the member can see before it fractures? Hopefully you said the ultimate stress. So that is going to be F sub u from our stress strain diagram. Now, what do we use for A? Well, we saw that the member failed right here at the connection. So we say that we need to determine what the area is through those bolt holes, and keeping in mind that the bolt holes will cause like a reduction in area. We call this the net section. So for the net section, we have a similar cross-sectional drawing, except now we have bolt holes that we have to account for. So we have something that looks close to this, get my three-dimensional drawing correct. And now we need to come up with a formula for the area shaded here in blue. This is what we were going to refer to as the net section area. So how can we come up with what the net section area is? Well, for steel members, we'll say that the net section area is equal to the width times the thickness, or the gross sectional area, minus this rectangular portion that's gone because of the bolt holes. So this rectangular portion has a value that is equal to the diameter of the bolt times the thickness. So we need to subtract out the diameter of the bolts times the thickness, and we have to do that twice because we went through 2 bolt holes. So we'll call that N. So in steel design, we'll continue to take this down and we'll say that this is the gross sectional area minus the number of bolt holes we go through. Now for the diameter of the bolt holes, we can just take the diameter, but in steel design we have to be conscious that when they build these things, they can't just use the diameter of the bolt, or else the diameter of the bolt and probably won't go through the hole. So in steel design we have an additional, the hole has to be an additional size above the nominal diameter of the bolt, okay? And we can get that diameter of the hole from the AISC manual. In addition to that, we say that when we punch these holes, which is often done, we can cause some damage, and so we take an additional 1/16 of an inch beyond that. So this is going to be now the diameter of the hole plus a 1/16 of an inch times the thickness of the plate. And that is what we will use for the net section area. Now, we've talked about the effective area, and you're probably wondering what's the difference between the net section and the effective area. Well, in steel design, we have what's called the effective area, and we define the effective area, A sub E, as capital U times A sub N, which is our net section area. U is a shear lag factor, and that's a topic for another day. But in this case, for just a simple tension member, a plate tension member, U would actually be 1 because there is no shear lag for this member. So it's connected at all spots or all portions of the cross section. So U is going to be 1, and in this case, we could do the calculation with the net section area for fracture. Note for fracture, phi is equal to 0.75. The last thing I need to warn you before you go off and tackle some of these problems on your own is that you have to consider all the fracture paths possible for this limit state through the net section area. So what do I mean by that? Well, what happens if your connection has like 5 bolt holes, right? We also have to consider the chance that we fracture through this section, but then we have to consider what happens if it fractures like this and then on a diagonal and then back and down. So now we're going to have to calculate the net section area for 2 different fracture paths. How do we handle this because it goes on an angle? Well, we kind of keep the same equation, but if we have things that go on an angle, we add a summation of s squared over 4g, which came from some experimental tests, times the thickness. I'm sure that makes perfect sense to you. Now I'm just gonna go ahead. I think you have like 52 pages of homework. It's gonna be no problem. You guys got it. I gotta run. Hope you enjoyed the lesson and good luck.